Sagittarius. She blamed you for what she did. And now the truth is coming out. There's a particular kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from betrayal itself, but from the silence that follows it. From the sideways glances. From the people who once believed in you now looking at you with doubt. And worst of all, Sagittarius, it came from someone you trusted. Someone who twisted the truth, cast you in the wrong role, and walked away while you stood there holding the weight of their actions. You didn't see it coming, did you? The blame, the whispers, the story that grew behind your back, fed by insecurity, fear, maybe even jealousy. First it was confusion, then disbelief, and then pain, because the truth was yours, but the world didn't seem ready to hear it. Not yet, but the stars have a different rhythm, and spirit never forgets the truth. In this video we'll walk gently through this painful unraveling, through the wound of being wrongly accused, through the quiet ache of being misunderstood, and finally through the rising. Because make no mistake, Sagittarius, the truth is coming, and when it arrives it won't need to shout. It will simply be known. If you're watching this with a lump in your throat or a fire in your chest, stay with me. Your soul is not alone in this experience. And if this message gives voice to what you've been holding inside, feel free to like, share, or subscribe. You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. You are not the story they tried to tell. You are the truth. Gate 1, the confusion that made them question you. Sagittarius, the worst kind of lie is the one that sounds almost true. It wasn't a dramatic betrayal at first, was it? It started subtly, like fog rolling in at dawn. A strange silence from someone who used to call you every week. A hesitation in a family member's tone when they spoke your name. A message left on read. You felt something shift, but you couldn't yet name what it was. So you did what you always do, you trusted. You believed in the goodness of those you loved. You gave them the benefit of the doubt because your heart is built that way. Open, expansive, loyal. But something wasn't right. And then came the realization. A strange comment here. A look that lingered too long. And then, a wave of accusation, not from the person directly involved, but from the people around them. Confused voices. Doubtful eyes. No one asked you directly. No one gave you the space to speak your truth. It was like walking into a room where a story had already been written, and you were cast as the villain. The confusion cut deep. You tried to stay calm, tried to explain. But the more you defended yourself, the more it seemed to confirm their suspicions. The narrative was already moving. You were chasing something invisible, trying to gather pieces of a puzzle you didn't even know existed. And through it all, the person who knew the truth, who started it, remained eerily quiet, calm, composed, even kind. That's what hurt the most. You weren't just blamed, you were replaced. Your version of reality was overwritten by someone else's fabrication. And because you've always been strong, always been fiery, always been bold, they twisted your strength into aggression. Your passion into instability, your fire into something dangerous. And still, you tried to give them grace. Because Sagittarius, your heart is wide. You want to believe people don't mean to hurt you. That they're just scared, misguided, acting out of their own pain. And maybe they were. But that doesn't make the wound any less real. That doesn't change the fact that someone you trusted betrayed not only your name, but the very essence of who you are. This is not just about being misunderstood. This is about being misrepresented. And the ripple effect ran deep. People you loved began pulling away, not because they didn't love you, but because they didn't know what to believe. Confusion became avoidance. Uncertainty became silence. And silence became a weapon, one that cut into the most tender parts of your being. Sagittarius, I see you. I see the way you held it all together, even when your world felt like it was crumbling beneath you. I see the strength it took not to lash out, not to return harm with harm. I see the tears you cried when no one was watching, the prayers whispered into your pillow, not for revenge but for clarity, for truth to rise. Because in your soul you knew. The truth doesn't hide forever. It never does. This first gate is painful because it challenges the very foundation of who you thought you could trust. It reveals the fragility of connection when lies are allowed to grow in the dark. But more than that, it reveals your resilience. You are still here, still holding your truth, still choosing the high road. And that is no small thing. You may feel like you lost something in this confusion, your image, your reputation, your place in people's hearts. But what you're gaining is something far greater: clarity. The kind that cannot be shaken. The kind that knows what's real even when others forget. And soon, Sagittarius, they will remember. Because confusion is temporary, but truth, it's eternal. In the next gate, we'll step deeper into the shadow. We'll talk about how your words were twisted, your truth distorted, and how someone close to you deliberately crafted a story to protect themselves at your expense. But remember this as we move forward. Your name may have been dragged through mud, but it is made of stars. And no amount of darkness can keep that light from rising. Gate 2. They twisted your words. Someone crafted a false story to protect themselves. Sagittarius, you've always been someone who speaks from the heart. Your words come alive with passion. You don't hide behind small talk and you don't tiptoe around the truth. Not because you want to hurt anyone, but because honesty is how you love. It's how you connect. It's how you breathe. But this time your words were stolen from you, taken out of context, rewritten, repackaged into a story that had nothing to do with who you really are. And worst of all, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. Someone you trusted knew exactly what they were doing. They took the pieces of conversations you shared in confidence, reassembled them into something toxic, and served them to others with wide eyes and trembling lips as if they were the victim. It wasn't just betrayal. It was character assassination. And they played the part well. Maybe they cried. Maybe they spoke in soft tones, painting themselves as someone just trying to protect or heal. Meanwhile, the people listening forgot to ask, why are we only hearing one side? They forgot to turn to you, to hold space for your voice. And you, strong, bold, deeply feeling Sagittarius, were left watching as a false version of yourself was paraded in front of people you loved. The gaslighting ran deep. They twisted your intentions, made your fire look like destruction, made your honesty sound like manipulation. They painted themselves as the one who had been harmed, so they could avoid accountability for what they had done. And they used your strength against you. Because when you finally got angry, when you raised your voice or showed your pain, they pointed to that moment and said, see, this is what I was talking about. It was never about the facts. It was about control. This person didn't want the truth to come out. Not because the truth was unclear, but because the truth would reveal their own shadow. And so they covered it with yours. They turned their guilt into your guilt, their actions into your fault, their shame into your burden. And still you held your ground. Because somewhere deep inside, even through the confusion and rage, you knew, this isn't mine to carry. You knew you were being pulled into a false narrative, and though it hurt like hell, you refused to shrink to fit it. You stopped defending yourself to people who didn't ask for your side. You stopped chasing closure from those who never intended to give it. Instead, you started choosing yourself. And that choice, quiet, steady, and fiercely courageous, is what begins to change everything. Not immediately, not publicly, but spiritually. Because when someone lies, they may convince others for a while. But when someone lives in truth, it leaves an imprint that cannot be erased. And Sagittarius, your energy doesn't lie. Even those who believed the false story felt a small ache in their chest when they saw you. Even those who turned their backs couldn't help but wonder, could it be that we got it wrong? And that wondering is how the truth begins to rise. I've worked with many Sagittarius souls who faced this exact kind of betrayal. One woman, Letitia, had her sister spin a tale so convincing that it caused a rift in their entire extended family. For over a year, she felt like a ghost, invited less, spoken to in fragments, watched like a stranger. But Letitia stayed grounded. She didn't retaliate. She didn't beg. She did her healing quietly. And then one day the sister slipped. A lie exposed. A timeline didn't add up. And everything began to unravel. Because the truth doesn't need force. It only needs time. Sagittarius, this gate is about reclaiming your narrative. Not to prove anything to anyone else, but to remind your soul of what it already knows. That you did not deserve what happened. That your truth is not too much. That your voice matters, even when others try to silence it. The person who blamed you may have gotten away with it for a moment. But moments pass. And spirit sees further than any lie ever could. The story is shifting now. Quietly. Powerfully. And not because you demanded it, but because truth always has a way of rising. As we move into the third gate, We'll explore how the cracks in the false narrative begin to show, how the universe, in its mysterious wisdom, starts to move pieces behind the scenes to bring justice, and how the one who hurt you begins to feel the weight of what they've done. The truth is coming, Sagittarius, and this time it will speak for you. Gate 3. The truth cannot stay buried. Spirit is pulling it to the surface. Sagittarius, lies can only survive in darkness, but your soul was born of light, and no matter how convincing the story was, no matter how many people believed her, no matter how well she played the victim and you were painted as the villain, Spirit never looked away. The universe does not need gossip to know what happened. It does not rely on hearsay to weigh what is true. It listens to the vibration beneath the words, to the energy behind the actions, to the integrity that never needed to defend itself to be real. And now that deeper current is rising. It may begin slowly. An old friend reaches out and says, "I've been thinking about what happened." Someone who once doubted you starts to look at the situation differently. Questions begin to surface. Inconsistencies become harder to ignore. The version of the story that once seemed so neat and tidy begins to crack. Not because anyone forced it, but because the truth is alive. And living things cannot stay buried. And neither can you. Sagittarius, there's a spiritual law at play here, and you are witnessing it unfold in real time. It is the law of energetic balance. Not the kind of instant justice that satisfies ego, but the slow, divine kind that restores soul-level order. The truth has a heartbeat, and when someone buries it, it continues to pulse beneath the surface, until the earth cannot contain it anymore. And that's what's happening now. You may begin to notice subtle shifts. A person who once ignored your messages suddenly replies. A mutual acquaintance lets something slip. An admission, a confession, a moment of accidental honesty. Or perhaps the person who blamed you begins to show their true colors more openly. Not because they've changed, but because the mask is slipping. Spirit is not punishing them. Spirit is simply revealing them. And you are no longer the one being watched. You are the one watching. You are witnessing the great unveiling. And it is bittersweet, because there's a part of you that never wanted this. You didn't want revenge. You didn't want anyone to suffer. You just wanted to be understood, to be heard, to have your name cleared, not with fireworks but with quiet dignity. And that's exactly how it's happening, because the truth doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it slips in through a whisper, a glance, a realization that spreads through a room like a warm light. People begin to remember who you really are, not because you reminded them, but because the truth inside them is waking up too. And the one who blamed you, she begins to feel it too. Not always with public shame. Sometimes it's more subtle. Restless nights, a tension in her spirit, a loss of the control she once had over the narrative. The burden of carrying a false story begins to show. In her energy, in her relationships, in her silence. She may try to maintain the illusion for a little while longer, but illusions require constant maintenance. And Spirit is patient. It waits until the soul can no longer bear the weight of its own performance. You, Sagittarius, are not responsible for her awakening. You are only responsible for your own healing. And healing is exactly what's happening. This moment, the one where the truth begins to rise, is not about vindication alone. It's about liberation. Because whether they apologize or not, whether they admit it or not, the spell has been broken. The story no longer controls you. The shadow no longer defines you. And the pain no longer silences you. You have survived the untrue version of your life. And now you are free to live the real one. I once worked with a Sagittarius woman named Ariel, who was blamed by her cousin for something she never said. The lie tore through her family like wildfire. She was called selfish, manipulative, even dangerous. And yet, she didn't retaliate. She grieved. She grew. And a year later, her cousin slipped. A text screenshot. A confession to another relative. A moment of spiritual fatigue. And suddenly, people saw it clearly. Without Ariel needing to prove anything, the truth simply stood up on its own. That's what's happening for you now. Spirit is speaking on your behalf. Not with anger, but with clarity. And as the truth continues to reveal itself, you will begin to feel lighter. Not because everything is perfect, but because the burden of injustice no longer lives on your shoulders. You are being cleared, Sagittarius. Not by manipulation or defense, but by alignment, by divine timing, by the sacred design that ensures no lie can hold power forever. As we move into the final gate, we'll explore the deeper soul lesson here. What it truly means to walk with integrity, to hold truth even when others discard it, and to trust that the universe, in all its wisdom, always returns balance to those who choose the light. Gate 4. The lesson: integrity, courage, and trust in divine justice. Sagittarius, when someone breaks your heart and tries to bury the truth with it, there are two wounds. The first is personal, the ache of being betrayed, misjudged, made into something you're not. But the second wound runs deeper. It is the soul wound of wondering whether the truth even matters anymore, whether goodness still holds weight in a world where stories are manipulated, and silence rewards the loudest liar. And yet you chose to stand tall. Even when the ground beneath your reputation trembled, you stood in what was real. You didn't fight dirty. You didn't become what they accused you of. You didn't let their shadow swallow your light. And that, Sagittarius, is the mark of someone whose integrity is not a performance but a path. This gate is not about revenge. It's about redemption. The kind that doesn't ask for anyone's permission. The kind that is written in your spirit, not on their lips. Because the people who wronged you may never say sorry. They may never admit what they did. But the universe has already seen it. And more importantly, you have outgrown it. You've learned the most painful yet powerful truth of all. That being honest does not guarantee others will be fair. That walking with integrity doesn't always look like winning. And still you walked it anyway. Because some victories are not measured in who claps for you. They are measured in who you became when no one was watching. You became honest, steady, awake, unshakable. That is real power. And that's the power they could never take from you, no matter what lies they told. Sagittarius, your soul has graduated through something sacred. You've learned to hold your head high in rooms full of people who may never know the full story, and still feel whole. You've learned to love yourself even when others cast shadows on your name. You've learned to be the fire that warms, not burns. The truth that stands, not shouts. The heart that opens again, not because it forgot, but because it forgave. Yes, forgave. Because you know now that their actions were never a reflection of your worth. They were a reflection of their fear, their pain, their own unhealed shame. And while you will never excuse what they did, you will also no longer let it define the chapters that come next. Your healing is not about them. It's about you reclaiming your life from the grip of betrayal. And now you are free. You are free to speak your truth without defending it. Free to choose new circles where trust is mutual and earned. Free to honor your boundaries, not to protect yourself from punishment, but to preserve your peace. And free to believe once again in the quiet justice of the universe. Because the universe has never failed you. It may have moved slowly. It may have felt silent for longer than your heart could bear. But all along it was rearranging the pieces, removing illusions, strengthening your voice, and guiding you into a new chapter where no one gets to write your story except you. I once guided a Sagittarius man named Caleb through a similar path. He was blamed by a coworker for a serious mistake that nearly cost him his job. He stayed quiet, not out of weakness, but because he knew fighting would only make the flames grow. Months passed, and then a slip, an audit. The truth exposed itself. Caleb was offered a promotion, not because he begged for it, but because his integrity had left a trail of light that couldn't be denied. And Sagittarius, so has yours. Let this final gate be your sacred homecoming. The place where you release the story they wrote and begin to write your own. The place where you no longer seek justice from them, because you now trust the justice within you. You didn't just survive what they did. You transcended it. And now you are ready. Ready to walk forward, not as the accused, not as the betrayed, but as the soul who held the line of truth when no one else would. The one who chose honesty when it cost everything. The one who now knows. No lie can outlive the light of a steady heart. The truth is no longer rising. It has arrived. And it is you. Conclusion. You are the truth, they just couldn't see it yet. Sagittarius, if you've made it here, if you've stayed with this message through the ache, the remembrance, the unraveling, I want you to take a deep breath. Let it in. Not just the words. Not just the story. But the knowing that's always lived quietly in your chest. Even when the world seemed to turn against you. You never lost your truth. They just couldn't see it. Or maybe they were too afraid to. Maybe your clarity was too bright for their fog. Maybe your honesty echoed too loud in rooms built on silence. Maybe your light reminded them of what they abandoned in themselves. But that was never your fault. And now the storm has passed. What remains is you bare brave wiser. What remains is your voice, no longer trembling. Your heart no longer questioning. Your fire, no longer shrinking to avoid the shadows of others. The truth has returned to you. Or maybe you returned to it, because you were never lost. Not to the universe. Not to your higher self. Not to spirit. And certainly not to the people who truly see you. Let this be your moment of release, not the kind that needs applause but the quiet kind that says, I know who I am. And that's enough. You do not need everyone to believe you anymore. You only need to believe yourself. If this message helped you feel witnessed, if it stirred something sacred inside, please like, share, or subscribe. Not for me, for you, for the community we're building together. A space where pain is spoken, not silenced. Where truth is honored, not hidden. Where your story in all its raw and radiant beauty is finally seen. I'm Sophia and this is Zodiac Wisdom. And I see you.